Whoever fights monsters should see to it that in the process he does not become a monster. And if you gaze long enough into an abyss, the abyss will gaze back at you. Good evening and welcome. This is Face the Nation. Our topic of discussion today is corruption against good governance. Corruption, the monster, and good governance, is it the real angel? Let's talk about all this and more with our four panelists this evening. Let me introduce them to you. First of all, Mr. Asoko Besekara, Executive Director of Transparency International. Professor Rajiv Vijayasinghe, former parliamentarian of the United People's Freedom Alliance. Attorney at Law, Mr. Shiva Laktilaka, and also Attorney at Law, Dr. Pratibha Mahanamaheva is also joining us this evening on our topic, which is corruption against good governance. Let me start off with Mr. Asoko Besekara, Executive Director of Transparency International. Asoko, you've taken over as the Executive Director of Transparency International now for a couple of weeks. Starting off, tell us the role of Transparency International. Do you think that the government is doing enough in terms of ensuring that they're on the right track in terms of combating corruption? The time starts now.
Yes, thank you. As you said, it's been a few weeks, but it's been an interesting few weeks. Regarding combating corruption, what's quite interesting is that we have the CBOC, the Bribery Commission, the key pillar, the key state pillar, which has really been strengthened by the 19th Amendment now. So what we see is we have CBOC being able to actually instigate investigations. We have the independent commissioners who have been appointed by the Constitutional Council. So it's very positive in that sense. But on the other side, we have ad hoc institutions. So we have the FCID, which is sort of a department under the police, which is formed through a Gazette notification, which I have in front of me here. Then we have Pressifac, which is a presidential commission. Then we have other things. We have the Anti-Corruption Secretariat. So what we can see here is that there's a bit of a conflation, and not that many people know exactly who is responsible for what. And I think with some of these ad hoc bodies, we run a risk here, because with those ad hoc bodies, it's quite difficult to understand how much political will is really pushing their own agendas. In my own opinion, things should really be focused around CBOC, and the fact that CBOC, from what I gather, has been given a good allocation under the budget is encouraging, but it should really be encouraged ever further, because with these ad hoc institutions, with the next political change, who knows what will happen with these ad hoc institutions. With CBOC, however, as many people may know, there is no opportunity to look at corruption within the private sector. There are a plethora of issues even within CBOC, and I think a new CBOC Act is being thought of. But do you think, Asoko, that the government is genuine in ensuring those corrupt are behind bars, or taking the right efforts to ensure that we are on the right track? I think more can be done, and I think the public will only believe it once they see political investigations against current politicians. As it stands, it seems as though some of the low-hanging fruit is being plucked, but more can be done.
Thank you very much. That, of course, was Mr. Asoko Besekara, Executive Director of Transparency International. Now I move on to Professor Rajiv Vijayasinghe, former parliamentarian of the UPFA. Professor, the present regime was given a mandate to tackle corruption. Do you think they are doing justice to that? The time starts now.
No, I think they have failed miserably. in terms of the expectations. I still believe that the situation is better than it was 12 months ago. But given the high expectations we all had, I feel personally a sense of deep depression. I've actually produced a book on this, and I will take this opportunity to announce that Godage and Sons brothers will be publishing this in 2 weeks' time. It's called Reform, Rights and Good Governance, and it includes both the long series I did, Sri Lanka Rights Watch, in 2012 to 2013, when I think I was the only parliamentarian on the government side who actually questioned some of the excesses that were taking place. And then 2 series that I published earlier this year on reforms and good governance. And I made a very simple point about dealing with corruption, because I think dealing with corruption that has occurred is one thing. The more important thing is setting in place mechanisms to stop or limit corruption. And this morning we had a discussion convened by Hiran Jawardena with the Bar Association, with the Organization of Professional Associations, with really very committed people like Chandra Dayaratna. And we looked at some of the issues that are necessary for good governance. And amongst the most important are transparency and accountability. And to me, one of the biggest problems with Seabok, I think you're right in saying it's good that they can start their investigations, but why are we not insisting that all assets declarations should belong in the public domain? You know, I think Asoka many years ago went and investigated my assets declaration, and he kindly told me, he said, the only reason we're looking is we don't want it to look as though we're only pursuing people we know are corrupt. But he had to ask. He shouldn't have to ask. He should have the right to see it on a website. Now that's one area. Let the public look at assets declarations not only of politicians but of anyone in public service who gives contracts beyond a certain amount. But I have a second point, and that is how do you deal with past corruption? There are 3 ways of doing it. One is retributive justice, one is restorative justice, the third is political victimization. And I'm afraid this government seems to be taking the third path. But what I told Karujayasuri ages ago, I gave him a paper, it's very simple. Make sure the assets declarations are public, allow anybody to question those declarations and compare them with the past, but give an amnesty to anyone who returns what the Thais would call unusual wealth. Anyone who has made a lot of money in the last 5 years and cannot explain it. And then a simple penalty, debar them from politics for a particular period. If you go for retributive justice, it takes a long time and cases are difficult to prove. What we want is for the nation to get back the money that has been plundered.
Thank you very much, Professor Rajiv Jayasinghe. I now move on to Attorney at Law, Mr. Shiral Laktilaka. Mr. Laktilaka is also attached to the Presidential Secretariat as well. Mr. Laktilaka, the statement that was given out by Professor Rajiv Jayasinghe a short while ago, a few minutes ago, saying that the expectations of the public have not been met in terms of tackling corruption. Do you agree or disagree?
Yeah, I can agree with him on that issue, but subject to certain qualification. The expectations are created within last 10 months due to certain conditions. I myself personally believe that the topic of corruption is right now highly politicized issue. So, in order to go into the real problem of corruption, we need to deviate from this politicized word of corruption, because the corruption in Sri Lanka is national menace. Now, there are the report prepared by Professor Indraratna in 2010. It says 10% of our GDP is draining out as corruption. So it's a national menace. It bleeds out the national economy. So therefore, I think it's high time to build up a new discourse on this issue, since this politically motivated corruption investigation. Yes, January 8 gave certain expectations to the society that the government which is going to be established would handle corrupt practices or corruption of the previous regime. That is one thing. So in relation to what Professor Vijay Singh has said, that expectation of filing cases against previous government corrupt practices is still not properly handled. Up to that extent, I would agree with Professor Vijay Singh.
And you disagree on which fronts?
But on the same time, as I said at the beginning, as a national menace, national disease, we have to tackle this issue with broader approaches. Now, if you look at the legal regime, now take for instance the challenge of our country. Our country has three challenges according to my own analysis. One is establishing a nation state or modern state with certain qualities that sans the rent-seeking behavior and the clientele behavior, and also establish a rule of law. And as Professor Vijay Singh has said, accountability regime, which brings the state officials to the system. So those are the new agenda where we are trying to bring out.
Thank you very much, Attorney at Law Mr. Shiral Laktilaka. I now move on to Attorney at Law Dr. Pratibha Mahanamheva. Dr. Mahanamheva, Professor Rajiv Vijay Singh and also Mr. Laktilaka were of the opinion that the people's aspirations have not been fulfilled in terms of tackling corruption, and Ashoka Bisekar said that more needs to be done. My question to you is, you were attached to the Human Rights Commission as well. My question to you is, Dr. Mahanamheva, is there good governance in Sri Lanka 11 months after the elections on the 8th of January? The time starts now.
Yes, this is basically a good governance was a concept. Now it's practically come into force. The reality is different. Whatever the Prime Minister said very recently, getting power is easy, maintaining power is the most difficult thing. So that we see with that statement, one we can see whatever you give good governance in theory cannot plant easily, because this is a service, public service, which is there from 1948. Immediately you can't turn 100% or 180% the other side. So step by step. Now I see a gap. Good governance and the practices we had earlier. Within 24 hours you can't change that. Within 8 months you can't change that. We have to change the culture. Now immediately if you plant a new concept, but we are not trying what we had done in past. So we have to identify, we have to realize what were the practices early. My argument, bribery and corruption is a disease like diabetic, which can be controlled. To control, the best system is good governance. But before good governance, you have to see certain things. Why a person take a bribe? We'll come to the ground root. The reality is that the salary is not sufficient. Can he run his family with that? Every day, is it board in Velikada prison, Grama Sevakas, innocent police constables and traffic police constables are there. And year one admission time, principals, and also tell me a high person who had gone there. No, this is the reality. This law is basically try to tackle poorest people. So where they take 20 rupees to 250 or 500. But there can be people taking billions. But whether this law is enough, that's what I'm telling you. In the good governance, first they have to have a framework to change this system and to file cases.
You said something very interesting, Dr. Mahanamheva. You said bribery and corruption is like diabetes. You said that it can be controlled. Cannot bribery and corruption be eradicated from our systems? Isn't that possible?
The system is this. If you say you can put into zero, I never agree. If you give 150 rupees for the public officer, give 50 rupees next day. So likewise, step by step you have to stop it. Immediately you can't inject insulin and stop it. This is where we have used in the past history. So that you have to understand the ground reality than the theories. Why people taking bribe? How can we resolve that? There are several systems. So my argument is this: the good governance, yes, there are certain gaps. If you fill the gaps, you can easily plan this good governance.
How long will it take to change the culture, Dr.
That's a very good system. Education, awareness, and also public service salaries and the perks as well as what they have earned. Now, suddenly if you stop these things, they can't survive. They had a lifestyle. If you are trying to change the lifestyle within one night with the budget system, then how can they survive? So that's why they say they are protest.
Before moving on to the journalist round, I want to pose a question to Mr. Laktilaka as well. Are you in agreement with what Dr. Mahanama was saying with regard to the culture, with regard to corruption and bribery need to be controlled and it cannot be eradicated?
So there are countries who have eradicated. Now, if you take this World Corruption Index, there are the number one country is Denmark, the number two is New Zealand, and third is Finland. So they have effectively eradicated, I would say, in comparative terms, corruption. Number 7 is Singapore. Singapore has done that. So I agree with Mr. Mahanama when he says we have to develop a culture. So that's why even in my intervention also I said that we have to deviate from this current discourse. Current discourse is about how to victimize my opponent through anti-corruption. That is not the way to handle this.
I'll give to Dr. Mahanama as well 20 seconds to respond to that.
Yeah, the issue is this: all these countries, I totally agree, they are well developed Western countries. But if you can give Shiral one country which has integrated developing country, I totally agree with this. Norway, Trondheim, I was there, 4:30, police station closed, Saturday, Sunday, police off. That means they have really developed. For that, it will take some time. So we can't compare those countries with Sri Lanka.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mahanama. Some points to ponder. Spoke of Norway as well. Can Sri Lanka go to that extreme and ensure that corruption is eradicated? Let's talk to our panelists in the coming few minutes, coming few hours, and discuss about how we can move forward as well. Let me introduce our journalists this evening. On to my right is Nadim Majid. Nadim, you look sleepy tonight.
Had a long drive in the traffic.
On to my immediate left is Sonali Vanikabaduge, and on to my far left is Yang Chaturanga. So I open the floor for questions from our journalists. You all have 15 minutes. So let's get the ball rolling. Let's start off with Chaturanga today.
Thank you, Sham. My first question is to Mr. Obesekar. Now, you very extensively spoke about the CBOC, the Bribery Commission, as we know about it. I would like to pose a question to you in this way. The Presifac has asked 13 individuals who are in high posts in different companies, different institutions, to step down for the smooth rolling of the investigations that are against them. How do you see this? Is this good or bad?
Well, it's good that people, I mean, the fact that people are being asked to stand down, I mean, it illustrates that the individuals are not as larger than the organizations that they're running. So that is encouraging. I think the one thing though regarding CBOC, which I would particularly focus on, and this is something that came to mind when the others were speaking, is that there is a real onus that has now shifted onto CBOC. We speak about CBOC becoming empowered now, but now with it being empowered to instigate its own investigations, it really does have the responsibility of being seen as instigating investigations across the board. You know, the fact that certain customs officials, maybe certain other low-level public servants are being investigated is a good step forward, but the public wants to see investigations across the board.
Mr. Abhisekar, now Professor Vijay Singh mentioned in his time period that he's not personally satisfied with the level of good governance. Are you satisfied with what's going on in the country at the moment?
Well, I think there are improvements that can be made, and actually one thing that Professor Vijay Singh touched on is the declaration of assets and liabilities of members of parliament. And I think the one thing that people always say is, my goodness, if they're public, anyway, if people are lying, I mean, what's the use of them? Even if they're well, firstly, they can be those things can be investigated, but through SEABOC. But the other thing is that the public, you know, can derive for themselves whether something is true or not. And on that point, later next week on the 9th of December, we Transparency International Sri Lanka, in conjunction with Verite Research, have drafted a declaration, an amendment to the Declaration of Assets and Liabilities Act, which it's also provided to SEABOC and got SEABOC's feedback, which will allow any member of the public not only to request asset declaration, which they can currently do, but also disseminate it in the media, speak about it in the media, even for journalists to speak about it, publish it. So that is a big step forward that can be taken soon.
Dr. Mahana Meva spoke about steps that should be taken for good governance to be established. Has the government taken steps to establish good governance in the country?
There are certain things which have...
Are the PRESIFAC, the institutions such as the FCID, steps that are in the right direction?
Well, I don't think ad hoc institutes, ad hoc departments to do things aren't necessarily the best way of handling things, in my opinion, because they still smell of the political will.
You see this as a thick carpet to just, you know...
Chaturanga, let me, with your permission, I want to direct that question to Professor Rajiv Vijay Singh as well. Bodies such as PRESIFAC, the FCID, are these institutes established in the right direction to tackle
Well, I think we've already discussed the problem with the FCID, the way it was gazetted, the way it's made responsible to the Prime Minister's office. You know, you can't do everything. Now, I really think that we would have evidence of decent attitudes if the Prime Minister actually, for once, kept his word and instituted an investigation into the central bank scam. You know, he managed to get Parliament dissolved before our report came out. But he promised, just as he promised before, to have an investigation. His first investigation consisted of his cronies who got terms of reference that were ridiculous. And they themselves said in their report, we can't really look at the problems. Then he kept saying it will happen as soon as there's a new Parliament. The new Parliament has now existed for 3 months. No investigation. I think we would see Dilrukh Shidas proving that she is not Ranil Wickremesinghe's poodle if she took up this case and used her new powers to investigate the corruption of the central bank scam. We all know that a lot of the officials who gave evidence were transferred. That is outrageous. The central bank officials who gave clear evidence about the utter involvement of the governor and the fact that he lied to us, the fact that the Ranil Wickremesinghe Commission lied, all that is patent. And what happens? These guys are transferred and the journalists haven't objected to that. You all have not raised these issues. You have not pointed out that the Prime Minister lied and lied and lied again when he said, I'm going to have an investigation immediately.
I just want to correct you there. We were the only network in the country to speak of the bond scam, and we went outright. Even on the 23rd of July, we had a story covering all aspects of the bond scam as well.
I say that you all were wonderful until the election. The focus now is, why didn't the Prime Minister keep his promise? Why were the central bank officials transferred? None of that is given the investigative weight that's needed. And I think SEABOC would prove itself if it made this its primary focus.
Mr. Laktilaka, I'd like to put you in the spotlight. We were talking about the need to change the culture, practical realities, etc. But there are certain things that are sort of spelled out to us in law. It's laid down in our constitution. We talk about the roles of the executive, the role of the judiciary. Certain things may not be set in stone, but what is written in our constitution gives us a general idea of what each of these arms of government should be doing. My question is regarding PRESIFAC, the Presidential Commission of Inquiry into Serious Acts of Fraud and Corruption. Am I correct in assuming that the financing for PRESIFAC comes from the allocation for the Presidential Secretariat?
Yeah, according to the 19th Amendment, the commissions are managed by the Presidential Secretariat technically. So the money or resources has to be channeled through the Presidential Secretariat. But so far, even under the present budget proposals, it is not clear whether that money is coming through the Presidential Secretariat.
Okay, Mr. Laktilaka, my other question is this. Now, we already have institutions, statutory bodies in our country that have been established for exactly this purpose, like the Commission to Investigate into Allegations of Bribery or Corruption, the Attorney General's Department, for example. These are all bodies with a certain amount of investigative power, even the Attorney General's Department. When a commission that is accountable to the President and by extension maybe to the people, when that commission is given a certain level of investigative, let's say judicial power, isn't that the executive impinging on the role of the judiciary, on judicial prerogatives?
No, but commissions, there is a Presidential Commission Act which empowers the President to appoint commissions to investigate. So it's not a judicial investigative body. It's not a quasi-judicial body. It can only recommend. It can go investigate into the incident and recommend certain things, and if the commission sees there is a culpability, then the commission has to act through Attorney General Department or other thing. So therefore this was the practice from 1978. President has time to time, by using the Presidential Commissions Act, appointed certain commissions. So that is the practice. But there is an argument on your question whether this is encroachment into that. So in a process of developing new state,
but don't you think that the funds that go into these commissions, because you've been in the political arena for a very long time, you're a very active proponent for democracy within the United National Party, then of course with your support for President Maithripala Sirisena and the regime of good governance. We've seen commissions that have been instituted by statute.
Commissions are manipulated.
And commissions that have been...
Commissions are manipulated.
But we've seen so many commissions come up with so many recommendations, and I have to scratch my head to think of one instance where any of these recommendations have been followed or even implemented or taken into consideration. Taking that into account, don't you think it's better to use these funds that are being used, because commissioners have to be paid. For the work of the commission to be done, you have to allocate a certain amount of money. Dr. Mahanama here was talking about salaries of police officers, etc. Don't you think that these funds that are being spent on these commissions are being wasted, and that they would be better utilized if they were being spent on strengthening our existing institutions, like for example the Attorney General's Department, which I believe still has a certain number of vacancies that is seriously...
Yes.
Yeah, you are correct. Now what is needed for Sri Lanka right now in tackling this national question of anti-corruption is that we have to develop our legal regime. I don't see that the existing legal system is adequate to tackle with present challenges. Second is training, as you said, the training of prosecutors as well as training of investigators. I saw a news interview. In a news interview, the Director General has said she has this much of number of investigators, little staff. With that, she has to maintain. So the third one is that independence. As Professor Vijay Singh has said, still our state institution does not show that they are prone or resistant to the political influence. So we have to change that. So this is in a larger manner, in order to develop a modern state. So we have to defeat this clientelism as well as rent-seeking behavior of the state.
Dr. Mahanama Heva, my first question is to you. Yesterday, Paralympic sprinter Oscar Pistorius was convicted of murder for shooting dead his girlfriend in 2013. In Sri Lanka, Colombo Chief JMO informed court that Wasim Tajuddin had been assaulted brutally, etc. All of that is in news reports today. Now, we are seeing progress on this case. However, incidentally, the judge who was hearing this case has been transferred to the Mathura District Court with effect from 1st January 2016. That's just a point. Now, justice delayed is justice denied. If South Africa was able to do justice to someone where the perpetrator was a celebrated individual such as Oscar Pistorius, do you think that it would be too much for us to expect justice to be done in cases such as these in Sri Lanka?
Yes, now I think Etchi, the president,
No, we are
CJ
not using the word itchy.
president, anyway, right, president of the country in Veeramantri Justice felicitation, really pronounced one thing, that he is not happy with the transfers. He said that because still there are certain systems beyond control. So that's why in the good governance system, as you asked, the sitting judge will be allowed to take that case. That's why the civil society, all these movements are making their voice. So even that, whether the transfers, whether they are actually properly done or not, it has to be decided by Judicial Service Commission. Immediately the Judicial Service Commission is responsible. That even Nigambo, there was a case, the magistrate once again called to JC. So in these cases, whatever the independency for the judge or the magistrate to continue that case should be given. So you can't 100% expect what happening in South Africa, in Sri Lanka, but both countries are common law, as well as same legal system is happening. Now, one time the case was closed, and after that once again there was certain petitions and the case came up, and JMO has already given certain things in the medical report. So it is where in a murder case, even 50 years ago or more than that, you can come up with that. But I think that is where you need the public assistance. When you are talking about bribery and corruption, that's why this commission has gone Mathura, Vaunia, Jaffna. That's good, because they are asking public assistance. Even cases can be filed, but if no evidence, how can you prove it? So therefore you have to start with the system, whether the investigation, once the case filed, it is not finally culprit. They are suspects.
Dr. Malaveva, Mr. Lakhtalika said that the Sebok commissioner had said that she does not have the number of staff, number of employees to conduct investigations. You were the commissioner for the Human Rights Commission as well. Did you also face a similar situation?
Yeah, but even when I was in the Human Rights Commission, we also had the same problem. But with Professor knows very well, Professor had already come there. And what we did with the limited staff and limited capacity, we try to do our best. But even if the labor force is not there, you can't ignore whatever happening, but you can requesting, but what you have to do, you have to show the progress. Now, we have to see whatever the cases filed, what is the progress? That progress should be revealed. This is nothing to hide.
Does the government assist in your efforts to...
I think they are trying their best, but still in the government also you can see, ministers are also debating certain things. We have seen. So that is a good governance. Freedom of expression, openly you can speak. Certain ministers are one side, other ministers are another side. So likewise there is a debate in the government also. In the cabinet also there is a debate. So they have to come up with one solution.
Isn't that healthy?
I think it's healthy. It's healthy because people get the news. So finally you have to come for one rather than dominating. Prime Minister dominating others. If you can give a freedom for all the ministers, so it will take some time. That's why I'm telling. If you ask immediately how long it will take, I can't take 5 or 10 years. It will take some time because ministers must come to one agreement. Other than that, if you go, what is the incident what I am explaining. In that case,
what are you explaining, Dr.
Avant-garde case.
The avant-garde. Yes, sir.
You see, one of the pillars of good governance, and we mentioned this very prominently this morning, apart from transparency, accountability, responsiveness, is consultative mechanisms. And I think you're perfectly right in saying that there should be a diversity of opinion. There should not be an imposition of a monolithic viewpoint. But I think what we are seeing now is chaos. These debates must happen before decisions are announced. Not where you have a decision. I mean, even take the present budget. It's quite healthy that a lot of objections have been raised and certain things are being changed. But in most countries in the world, before the budget is formulated, it doesn't emerge like a teeny from the head of the finance minister or whoever created this budget. The discussion and debate takes place before the guidelines are set in place. What happens in Sri Lanka is someone makes an arbitrary decision or pronouncement or whatever, then at least, as you said, people object to it, which is better than them keeping quiet. Today we had the situation in Parliament where I think the former president said, well, none of you objected, etc., etc. And the argument is, well, they were all frightened. So you now have a situation where discussion and debate is good, but it should happen before. The consultative process must be entrenched. That is part of good governance.
Mr. Laktilaka, what Professor Rajiv Vijay Singh is talking about, debates should happen before decisions are made.
Of course.
Makes a lot of sense, isn't it?
Yeah. That shows that planning has not happened properly. So
there are power centers. Is there power centers right now? A power center, one with the president, another power center with the prime minister, another power center with the former president, another power center with the opposition leader, another power center with the chief opposition whip. You have power centers now in parliament. Is that healthy?
That is natural, no? In any political context, you get power centers.
And that's healthy?
That's healthy.
And it's on the right track. We are on the right track.
Yeah, ultimately it depends on how much you develop a consensual decision. Whether you have several power centers, if these power centers are able to reach for a consensual decision, that shows the maturity of democracy.
Thank you very much.
Take Japanese government.
Thank you very much, Mr. Laktilaka. A lot of examples are coming through in terms of international examples. We spoke of Denmark, we spoke of Norway, and now we're speaking of Japan. Almost all the countries that we spoke of are developed nations. We spoke of South Africa a short while ago. Yes, sir.
You all said it's developed. Singapore was not a developing nation. I think one of the keys to development that also includes good governance is leadership. And I think, with all his faults, Lee Kuan Yew had a vision, and he was also straight about that vision. He didn't go around in a twisted fashion.
Thank you very much.
So don't just assume that Singapore is developed. Singapore developed because it instituted certain principles. I think that's important to know.
Everything needs political will. That is what I was trying to say. At the end of the day, countries can be developed, or developing nations should keep in mind, if they want to eradicate corruption, if they want to ensure good governance, one thing is clear: there has to be a political will. Let's talk all this and more after this short commercial break. You are with Face the Nation. Welcome back. This is Face the Nation. We are now on the third round. Let's speak to Professor Rajiv Vijay Singh now. Professor Vijay Singh, there was a significant development in Parliament recently. The Prime Minister announced that the Right to Information Bill has received the Cabinet nod. How positive is this for a country like Sri Lanka?
I think it's a very good thing. I also think we should register the fact that according to the President's manifesto of January, the Right to Information Bill should have been presented to Parliament in February 2015. When I pointed out that none of the promises in the President's manifesto had been kept except one, people asked me for examples. I gave 7 examples. I still believe that President Sirisena is sincere about wanting to make reforms, but unfortunately had the most dreadful instruments in the world to do this for him at the moment. The right to information was promised in February, finally got a draft in April. It was not a bad draft at all. I actually sent some responses saying, can we have some changes? I didn't even get a reply to this. This was in April last year. Then it was forgotten. When I mentioned that it was forgotten, the Cabinet spokesman said, no, we're going to introduce it next week. It's a bit like the Code of Conduct. When I said no one is interested, they said, Professor Vijay shouldn't say it, we're introducing it next week. Next week came and next week went and the next week came and next week went, and we still don't have a Code of Conduct, which was promised in January. We don't have the right to information. I think it's a good thing it's come, but I think the problem with the draft I saw in April, I haven't seen the new draft, But what I think is still there is it ignores what I think should be the fundamental principle that all information relating to the public must be in the public domain unless government can show that it is not in the interests of the country, that it should be public. The principle now observed is all information should belong to government, and if the people can prove that there is a reason to make it public, they have to ask for it. When I was Minister of Higher Education, and perhaps this is one of the reasons they didn't want me to last very long, was I told the UGC, make sure that every month all expenditure by the university is put up on the university website. To me it seems that there is a budget the universities have. The way they spend it should be open to all stakeholders. I put that in the act, that there should be financial accountability. I remember 20 years ago, I said this, and the then chairman of the UGC, he wasn't the brightest man in the world, said, no, we have accountability. We send our accounts to Parliament. You know, having been in Parliament, I know how few members even bother to read them. But I said, look, give them to the students. The students are the reasons we have higher education. I'm not in favor of allowing the students to decide what to do. They should not have executive authority. But they should be the monitors. Stakeholders must be allowed to see, and it's a very simple matter to say every organization in government must publish income and expenditure on its website every month. Simple. So information must belong to the public unless there is a good reason to keep it confidential, and that should be the principle of the Act, and I don't think it's the principle that this government has followed.
Thank you very much, Professor Vijay Singh. I now move on to Attorney at Law Shival Laktilaka. Mr. Laktilaka, Professor Vijay Singh has said that the President is genuine, however he has the most dreadful tools to deal with. Are you in agreement?
No, that is Professor Vijay Singh's opinion. What is happening right now, January 8, we have seen that people have given a mandate to the incumbent regime or president or the prime minister and the ruling party to change the system of this country. So change it, so the bribery and corruption, all other things, efficiency, the investment, prosperity, everything coming under that banner. The change to do what? That is to establish a modern state. That's why I am emphasizing this concept on and on. Modern state. Although 1948 we have established a modern state, it's only a concept. So far we have not been able to establish a modern state. It's based on client and patron relationship, rent-seeking behaviors, corruption, rule of law is not happening in objective manner, no accountability. Every part of the state is like that. So we have seen that one cause for this particular illness is the existing executive presidency. So now earlier through the 19th Amendment we tried to change certain aspects of the executive presidency. Now we are talking about completely going away from the executive presidency. So we believe by doing away with that, it would help to establish a modern state. Why we need a modern state? Because still our country is not a democratic country. Although we use the name of democracy, still our society is not humane. Still our society is not civilized in broader terms. So we need Oedipus that would help to create a prosperous nation in this kind of foundation. So that's why what the present government, the president and the regime is trying to do that. But delays are there. Now even if you take the good examples of the past, 1994 government wanted to introduce Human Rights Commission Act. But what happened? It came as a half-baked product. Now, as Professor Vijay Singh said, Right of Information Bill would also a half-baked product. But then it's the challenge of the society to achieve. what they decide at when they voted on January 8th.
Mr. Lakthilaka, you said that there are delays. The President is the head of cabinet. He can take action. Why? How come there are delays now?
No, decision making, consensual decision making is a delayed process. Even in Switzerland, it's like that.
Thank you very much.
You would agree with my view that the
Thank you very much.
Yeah,
Professor will come to the debate in a bit. Before decisions are made, we can definitely debate about it, so don't worry about it. I move on to Dr. Mahana Meheva. And now, Dr. Mahana Meheva, interestingly, we speak about good governance. We speak of anti-corruption efforts in Sri Lanka. However, we speak of institutes such as the PRESIFAC, the Presidential Commission on Large-Scale Corruption and Fraud. We speak of the Financial Crimes Investigations Division. We speak of a lot of institutes these days. Do you think that these institutes are the way out, or is it a public gimmick that is taking place right now? The time starts now.
My opinion, basically, setting up institutions or strengthening laws is not enough. What the government try to set up institutions, strengthening laws, making amendments. That is only one part of the issue. But why don't you see the society? Strengthening institution will help. What happened in past? You have to think prevention methods. The preventive methods are very, very low, which is not happening. So why these institutions have been set up? Maybe whatever done in past and to stop in future. Even still those things are happening. Even today it is just like blood circulating. That is the corruption. But where we start now? Have you ever thought about the prevention system? I'll give a very simple example. If East Sri Lanka come into force, you can stop many things. Now Southern Provincial Council, they have a system of giving this vehicle revenue license. You pay it, immediately you get the copy. You don't want to go to the divisional secretariat. You all are not talking about that. Where these corruption and bribery happening? In lower level it get caught. Now for example, if a contractor, the contract was given and he make a good building, thereafter he may donate another house. Can you run behind that? Now, computer. A provider giving 100 computer for the institution. Sometimes the head of the institution may get 3 or 2 computers. Can you go behind that? So we have to see a system that is where basically must have a complaint lodging e-system even. Now they have to have a database. Sometimes you have to keep secret against the head. Sometimes these things are given by employees. So is there a system to protect them? That's why the central bank system said. It happened. With that everyone is fear. No one is going again. Hidden fear is there. Even 100% democracy we are talking about here. But we have to first do a changing of this public service. How to change the public service? East Sri Lanka is one of the best, where we can achieve certain things. In this system, even no one may go to the office. If you go to the office only, they will ask certain money.
Dr. Mahana, I want to again take your attention to the organizations that have been set up by the present regime, the PRESIFAC and the FCID. Professor Vijay Singh spoke of 3 important factors with regard to what is happening right now. He spoke of retributional justice, and he also spoke of political victimization. Do you think that the 2 institutes that have been established right now is directed at political victimization? Is that what is happening right now?
I think there is a Supreme Court case also pending. It's coming in February. The setting up of FCID with the special gazette. So therefore, if it is a court case, I can basically give a reason. It's not good on one side. But the other way...
But looking at the individuals who have been summoned to the FCID and PRESIFAC, do you think that political victimization is something
now,
that...
there is a political victimization. Basically, you have to see the facts also. If it is really genuine complaints, then what they can do, they can come to public and say. That's why openly they are saying it.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mohan. I now move on to Ashoka Besekara, Executive Director of Transparency International. Ashoka, we saw during the last couple of months many governments coming into the forefront, especially the US government coming to the forefront and stating that they would help the money laundering activities that had allegedly taken place in Sri Lanka. We saw the cabinet spokesperson speaking of a VVIP's son having accounts in Dubai. Many incidents of this nature took place over the last few months. Transparency International, how do you all view the developments that have taken place over the last 11 months, nearly 11 months, in Sri Lanka in terms of tackling corruption?
Well, I think on this specific issue of these sort of vast sums of money which are overseas, I think we end up building great expectations around the fact that we'll say so many $1 billion are hidden here and hidden there. I mean, I think it's very positive that that engagements are being made to try to recover these assets. But on having spoken to people who have done a fair bit of work on this, I think it's also essential that we are also quite realistic. So many people actually view some of these things as and this is very unfortunate.
Are we going behind a mirage? Is that what you're trying to say?
Well, sometimes the main effect of some of these things can be preventative as opposed to actually recovering the assets themselves, because unfortunately asset recovery has been extremely unsuccessful in many international examples. So it's necessary to be to sort of balance expectations there. So the idea that billions and billions of dollars will suddenly flow into the country, which can then be invested into schools and hospitals, that would be ideal, but it seems unrealistic. But here's hoping that that would be possible. Regarding other steps of the government, one thing that I would like to touch on is that the government has just signed up to the Open Government Partnership just in the last month and a half. What that does there is that and Professor Vijay Singh even touched on it, this idea of consultative processes. At the very core of the Open Government Partnership is the idea that there is a policy plan that the government creates in consultation with civil society. Now, here's hoping that that works out well, and civil society also has to step up to the plate. But there's a real opportunity here, because the 100-day manifesto really inculcated this idea that by such and such a date, such and such a thing should be done. And even for the media, it enabled the media to turn around and say, my goodness, wasn't this supposed to be done a week ago? Maybe it didn't happen enough, as Professor Vijay Singh was touching on.
It didn't happen at all.
Yeah, but those sorts of commitments of the government to delivering things on a timeline can really be extended. And by the 30th of June, this government will have to have their policy plan for 2 years finalized. So that's something worth monitoring, and the Ministry of Justice is going to be taking a lead role there. So that's one area worth viewing, which civil society hasn't pushed for, but government has actually themselves engaged in them and signed up to.
Thank you very much, Ashoka, for your thoughts. Before moving on to the journalist round, I want to pose a question to Mr. Laktilaka again with regard to a statement that was made by the President. He said that he was also concerned about the central bank bond issue, and in fact requested the Prime Minister to look into changing the governor as well. And then on the 17th, following the 17th August elections, the President said that there would be a body consisting of the President's office and also the Prime Minister's office to appoint individuals to state institutions. However, what has taken place over the last few weeks or so, we have seen a brother of a particular minister being appointed as the head of a particular institution. Are we sliding back again to what we experienced a few months ago? Because we saw today, I saw that a powerful minister in the cabinet going and contesting the elections alongside with one of his brothers. A lot of implications right now. And I just want to know, are we sliding back again to what we were in some time ago?
All these examples shows the challenge behind us. The people who have come forward to change the previous regime on January 8th had certain aspirations based on democratic culture. The people who have come into power, who have no idea about how the people wanted to establish this change, are deviating from the main thinking and main behavior. So those are the examples where you have said. But what I have observed is that while the system is changing in very slow manner, the public opinion or civil space has firmly established after January 8th. Now, the politicians as usual are trying to manipulate the system. But on the other hand, the civil voices, civil space is playing a much bigger role. Now, very good example is the pressure that has been developed against the avant-garde case, and ultimately the powerful minister has to step down. So this is a very good example how our society is also, evolving in another direction, while the politicians always try to play the old game. So I see a drastic change in certain way, but on the other hand, yes, I also agreed. I am the first person who voiced my opinion against the central bank issue. As a result, you know what happened. I was subject to heavy criticism in the parliament using parliamentary privilege. So still our society is not matured enough to handle this kind of issues.
Thank you very much.
That's what I have to say.
Yes,
Dr. Mahana Mehma, what do you think the role the Attorney General plays in the country when it comes to tackling corruption?
Yeah, now we saw a lot of public discussions were there with regard to non-filing of cases. Whether certain issues we have to see the discretion power to Attorney General. Certain cases where Victor Ivan also challenged earlier time. So Attorney General is a discretion, and also when indictment was in, if no evidence, yes, there is a thing. So Attorney General as the chief legal advisor to the government or to the state basically has to rush these cases. There are a lot of delays. If you take, for example, child abuse or any cases, sometimes once again Honorable Attorney General may not have enough staff. And also LLRC, there was one recommendation where I like that to set up this district level or provincial level Attorney Generals, Deputy Attorney Generals.
You spoke of preventive measures, and earlier in your time you spoke about approaching this in a step-by-step basis. Do you think that the expediting whatever happens at the Attorney General's office is a measure that can be taken to further tackle corruption in our country?
Yeah, it can be a positive step. But my argument once again, Attorney General or even Director General of Bribery and Corruption cannot do it alone. These are all officials, but we need the civil society press. Even I saw when the Freedom of Information Bill came up, civil society, those who supported to this government say they never consulted us. So whatever the bill is not coming up. So once again the civil society has to have a consultation whether there is a space for them to come up with the amendments. And basically this Attorney General independent is very important. In that case only we have to see how the general public, the law, actually we need the justice, and public, they are waiting whether the justice is happening or not. That is another concern. We saw certain cases against the powerful Piliyandala area, one of the parliamentary member, murder charges were withdrawn. So who can go and challenge in these cases? Only they can ask questions in parliament. So certain issues are there like that. But I totally believe the civil society, public, we have to educate and see a system to prevent this, rather than strengthening laws. I always lobbying, or I always encouraging not only for the institution, There must be a method. And see the reason. Have we ever discussed why people take bribe up to now? We are all talking about the institutions, strengthening laws, having policies and all. But come to the grassroots level and see what are the reasons why we can't eradicate that. If that system was set up, definitely one is politicians, political will, and the other side is public officers. So these are the two. So we are not talking about Canada private sector. Even in Canada, Human Rights Commission having the power to take private sector into their hand. Are you talking about sex bribes? These are the real incidents which are happening. If this is actually watching by general public. So we are just discussing the strength, policies and whatever agreement signing. But what are the reasons? Have we ever spoken about reason? We have to give a solution for general public. These are the real reasons. That's why people take bribes.
What are the reasons, Dr. Mahanameva? You speak of reasons.
Economic reasons are there. That is number one. Number two, power and also authority which support them to take those bribes. Third one, basically what will happen? These powerful officers, they want to dominate. Those are some of the reasons. The main one is economic reasons.
Ms. Laktila, are you in agreement with what Dr. Mahanameva is saying with regard to the economy? But in my opinion, I strongly believe that the people's needs and wants increases. However much you get, you are not satisfied. So for me, it seems a bit complex
now
to understand.
Taking bribe and corruption, bribes and corruption are two different offences. Now, bribe, when Mr. Mahanama says economic conditions are applicable, there is a partly or halfway truth. But when it comes to corruption, you can't rationalize it, right? So therefore you have to differentiate two aspects.
Very quickly, sir, let me pop in this question to you once again. Now, we were talking about the Presifact, the FCID and even the Bribery Commission in long term, but do you think that this is even in fact Dr. Mahanameva spoke about measures, authority, power. Are they measures that are taken by power, a thick carpet that have been set up just to sweep individuals underneath and to protect them? Do you think that way?
Yeah, in Sri Lanka, there is a very powerful political authority. Right, January 8th is not a date where we have observed the French Revolution, right? So it's another change. So the same structures, same processes, same attitudes prevails. So therefore, politicians, the power blocks play a game. So as a result, we have seen that certain corrupt, certain allegations were not properly investigated. We have seen that certain corruption incidents were delayed. So far we have seen only 2 or 3 cases were reported to courts after 10 months of investigation. And also I'm quite aware that even the Bribery Commission has concluded 2 or 3 cases under the previous government before January 8th, but still it has not come to the courts.
Sonali.
Dr. Mahanameva, now when we talk about corruption, this involves a lot of action. I'd also like to draw your attention to the omissions or inaction by state officials. Now in Saudi Arabia, a Sri Lankan woman is on death row. This is also a story commonly seen in the news. Filing clemency appeals aren't working. There is no due process. What of diplomatic relations? There's a Sri Lankan Foreign Affairs Minister, there's the Sri Lanka Foreign Employment Bureau. Nothing is working. Why is it not working? Sri Lanka is having a rendezvous with the West. Samantha Power was in Sri Lanka last week. Why are we not doing anything effective? Is this also going to be like what happened to Rizana Nafiq?
My opinion basically, Saudi Arabia having a very powerful Human Rights Commission. What Sri Lanka government should do now, if foreign ministry can start dialogue with Saudi Arabia Human Rights Commission, because diplomatic way they can intervene. In Beijing I met Saudi Arabian Human Rights Commission. What he said to me last year 2014, your government is never consulting us, because they can intervene international level. You correctly said legal assistance, now said lawyers are appearing. That is not enough Sharia law. According to Sharia law, basically stoning or caning is happening, but there can be an intervention from Saudi Arabian Human Rights Commission. If Saudi Arabian Human Rights Commission, at least if they can intervene in a humanitarian ground, we can at least get a reduction punishment in that. So my basic argument is, even Foreign Employment Bureau and other things, same thing happened to Rizana, but Rizana case also Saudi Arabian Human Rights
Mr.
Commission.
Laktilaka, you want to add something to that?
Yeah, I mean, I see this whole incident in a different way. It's a neglection by the embassy of Sri Lanka, because you know, if you look at the Sharia law, this particular offence, there are certain offences which are against the God or the Allah. So this adultery,
This is a
Mr. Laktilaka,
hudud.
it's known as a hudud crime in Sharia law.
hudud
It's
crime.
offences
Yeah.
against
So
God
then
that
you-
are unforgivable.
yeah, unforgivable.
But again, there is a
why-
standard of proof.
May I say this? Why somebody has not advised before she caught for this? Don't confess. So she has given the confession without any legal assistance. So that is the
The
basic
argument is
error.
that
So
she had
that's
been
a state
pressured into a
neglection.
confession.
Pardon?
She had been pressured into a
No,
confession.
Nadim, let me correct you there as well. Mr. Laktilaka was correct. The embassy officials had failed to give legal assistance, and on 3
So
occasions.
it comes to my point
It's not
again.
only- it's
there-
not-
now
sorry, it's
officials
not
at
only
the
Saudi
embassy
Arabia, every
were
country
not
like that.
aware
Also the
that
Middle
a
East
Sri
countries.
Lankan citizen. Embassies, we have foreign embassies in other countries. One of their primary duties is to look into the welfare of our citizens who are in those countries. Officials at the embassy were not even aware that one of our citizens was languishing in a Saudi prison. I'm not sure if the embassy is aware of how many Sri Lankans are currently languishing in prisons in the Middle East. Usually, when we talk about oversight, one of the primary institutions for oversight in this country, even though a lot of people may not be aware of it, I'm sure Professor Raja Vijay Singh and also Asoka, I'd like your views on this as well. One of the primary institutions of oversight is Parliament and the committees in Parliament. Usually, for example, if we saw something like this, which in the United States we saw what happened in Benghazi, in other places, you'd be hauled up in front of a House Committee on Foreign Affairs or such a body, and the officials would be taken to task for dereliction of duty. Asoka, how do you see what has happened in Saudi Arabia and what appears to be a lack of oversight in Parliament?
Yeah, I mean, I think Professor Vijay Singh has, I'd like to think that he'd agree with me on this, that the committee system of Parliament is, I mean, when you start looking at the minutes of the consultative committees, you start understanding that nearly 80% of the things that they handle are parochial issues. So the idea that they would be engaging in this sort of oversight is unfortunately something that we just can't expect as it stands. I know that Professor Vijay Singh has put forward amendments to our standing orders which would really enhance the oversight capacity of our committees.
So we were talking about the 100 days program, right?
Yeah.
Now these things were the ABCs of the 100-day program. I'm sure Mr. Laktilaka is also aware of this. The amending of the standing orders, the right to information bill, these were all listed out within the before the 19th amendment. These were the first few weeks, first couple of months of the 100 days program. Is there a willful attempt on the part of the powers that be to keep the people ignorant?
Can I answer that? The answer is absolutely yes. There were 7 commitments for political change, of which 6 were ignored. One of them was the amendment of standing order. When I went in that day when it was supposed to be done, Mr. Kirialla said, no, we've got nothing ready. So I said, then use my amendment. And I must say, Mr. Kirialla allowed me to put it to Parliament. It was passed. The Standing Order Committee met. We actually moved through all the areas I amended except the committees, because we were told that the Prime Minister has his own ideas. So let's wait for the Prime Minister. After that, the committee never met. I gathered from the Speaker that the Prime Minister had prevented us meeting. Nothing happened. His acolyte Priyani Vijayasekara, who is now an ambassador, another of the non-political appointments that has been appointed despite the President's manifesto, she said, well, I'd got something ready, and her draft was not bad. Prime Minister told me not to put it. So nothing was done about the standing
Professor
order
Vijay Singh,
changes, and Asoka is
you that
perfectly
you have to
right.
take responsibility for the statement when you mention a person's name,
take
a
full
person who is not
responsibility for
present in this
everything I
meeting?
say. You know that perfectly well, and everyone is open to challenge me or my good friend Shamir. But the simple fact is this, that the committee system in Parliament is a complete joke, unlike any other committee system in the world. And let me not only blame the Prime Minister, although he has much to blame, because he never came to committees. You know, the Foreign Affairs Committee, I went through the minutes, I was not on it. All those tragedies happening in Geneva, never once was the Foreign Minister questioned in Parliament on the terrible, appalling situation in Geneva. None of the opposition turned up. Resettlement.
Is it because MPs are unaware of what their duties are in terms of...
Exactly. You know, when my father was Secretary General, I mean, the reason I know so much about this is because I learned from my father. He would train MPs. When they came into Parliament, they were told what their responsibilities are. Now what happens? When I went into Parliament, what was I told? How to get a duty-free car. What the perks are. How many computers I can buy. Nothing about the duties and responsibilities. When I asked a question, I was the first member on the government side to ask a question. Some of my colleagues said, don't embarrass the government. Fortunately, the President said, why aren't you people asking questions? I was the first to move an adjournment motion. Because people don't understand that MPs have a role to play in Parliament. They are seen as simply fodder. I now feel even more, having seen this government in action. I go back to what Vasanta Sennayak and I suggested a year and a half ago when we suggested change. I don't think we should abolish the presidential system. We should strengthen Parliament to do oversight, but allow the President to appoint non-members of Parliament as ministers who have no political access to grind, who don't want to win elections, who give jobs to their constituents.
Complete total separation of powers.
Which is the case in all other countries. In no other country in the world that has an executive president are members of Parliament in the cabinet.
Thank you very much.
So I think
Professor
those
Jaisingha.
are the areas in which Parliament should be strengthened, but it should be made independent of the executive.
Thank you very much, Professor Jaisingha. As we spoke of the current death row sentence that has been handed over to a Sri Lankan citizen in Saudi Arabia, I thought I'll just clarify certain points that was brought forward. According to the Hudhud crime, that is adultery, that we're talking about, according to Sharia law, there is two incidents. Example one is the individual concerned, the victim, has to testify 3 times, saying that she had committed the crime in question. The second point being, according to Sharia law, she can request for 3 independent men to testify before court that with the individual concerned.
Witnesses who have
That's
to
right.
actually witness the act taking place.
Act taking place. So many say that the embassy officials should have informed the victim in concern that she should seek the second option, that is not testifying but requesting that 4 males testify before court that they in fact witnessed the act in question. So the embassy officials should have informed the victim in question and should not have ill-advised her to confess to the crime. The Foreign Employment Bureau in Sri Lanka has a huge role to play to ensure when citizens of Sri Lanka go to the Middle East that they are quite well aware about the laws there, the regulations. At the end of the day, whoever it is, it's a Sri Lankan national. We stand by that lady. At the end of the day, it's our responsibility as a nation and as a people in this island nation. We're now going for a short commercial break. When we come back, we will be discussing again about corruption against good governance. Welcome back. This is Face the Nation. The topic of discussion today is corruption against good governance. We'll start off the session, the final round, with Professor Rajiv Jaisingha. Professor Asoka Obesekera, Transparency International Executive Director, said that asset recovery has been unsuccessful largely across the world. What is happening right now in terms of recovering the assets of VVIP sons, individuals who were connected to the previous regime? You were also part of the previous regime before the 8th of January this year. How do you view the developments that are taking place right now?
Because we're confusing 2 things. One is the need to recover assets, which I think is absolute. The second is, as I said, restorative justice and political victimization. And obviously, if those 2 take precedence, then it will be complete denial. And then you have to prove things legally. And Asoka said that's almost impossible. That is why in January I said, adopt a policy of restorative justice together with amnesties provided the assets come back. And I think we would have got a lot. I think there are plenty of cases where we know people have got houses that they never had before, where they suddenly became rich. The Thai word is unusually rich. So you have to think of new mechanisms. What is the purpose? The purpose is not to victimize people. The purpose is to actually get things back to the people and prevent it happening again. But let me take up two important points. One is, I think Dr. Mahanameva also mentioned the fact that in order to have the rule of law, you must have better investigation. When I started doing work with the police way back at the Peace Secretariat, and I told the police human rights are not being followed by you, some of the senior policemen, I think the present IGP was also there, he was very bright. He said, our problem is that we don't have enough expertise in investigation, in interrogation, and in prosecution. That is why people resort to other matters. So they need better training. We have done nothing about improving training, even for public servants. Now, the second point I wish to make, and it's shocking, there is a National Human Rights Action Plan, which is now being completely forgotten. We don't even have a ministry. And when you talk to the Foreign Employment Bureau and the Foreign Ministry, in that action plan there were clear guidelines as to how the Foreign Ministry and the Foreign Employment Bureau should monitor all Sri Lankans abroad. But when we tried to move, we could get nothing done. As you know, the Employment Bureau plus the Foreign Ministry, hotbeds of corruption. Two ambassadors who tried to do things were got rid of. The ambassador in Lebanon and in Oman. Asita Pereira, my old friend, was sacked by the last government, not this one, because he tried to stop the smuggling of people which Foreign Ministry officials were involved in into Italy. Now we need systems. Those systems are indicated in the National Human Rights Action Plan. It has been completely forgotten. No one is responsible for it. It is shocking because it was approved by Cabinet.
Thank you very much, Professor Rajiv Jayasinghe. I now move on to Mr. Ashok Obesekera, Executive Director of Transparency International. Mr. Obesekera, the 9th of December is quite significant in terms of tackling anti-corruption. It's the International Day for Anti-Corruption. How does Transparency International view the way forward for Sri Lanka in terms of tackling the anti-corruption issues that we have right now, the corruption issues that we have right now?
So, I think good work can still be done. And as I touched on before, the CIABOC is a strengthened institution, and one positive for the 9th of December this year is that for the first time CIABOC and civil society organizations are actually working in collaboration. So even Transparency International Sri Lanka and CIABOC have a memorandum of understanding. Now, what we're looking at doing this year, and I touched on it earlier, is really about pushing forward things like the Declaration of Assets and Liabilities Act Amendment. These small things. I mean, let's not forget that asset declarations, this Vatkam Prakasha, there was so much focus on all of these sorts of terms leading up to the last elections in 2015, both elections. And now these things have just dropped off out of sight. So there are some real opportunities now of amending the law and actually empowering citizens. And when I'm speaking about empowering citizens here, these aren't big adjustments we're talking about. This is just about ensuring that the rights which are already there. So even at the moment, any citizen on the payment of 750 rupees can request an asset declaration. Now they can start disseminating these sorts of things. So that there are these low-hanging fruit that can definitely be plucked. But moving forward, it's really a lot is going to lie in the hands of how independent CIABOC is in instigating its own investigations and really going after people who the public currently feel are beyond approach.
Central Bank.
Thank you very much, Mr. Obesekera, for your thoughts. I now move on to Dr. Pratibha Mahanameva, who is also an attorney at law. He was the former commissioner of the Human Rights Commission as well. Mr. Mahanameva, you were part of a state institution for some time now. Attention was directed at CIABOC by Mr. Obesekera, saying that more needs to be done there. They have to take an active role in combating corruption. how do you view the role of NGOs, INGOs, civil society, the public when tackling corruption?
Excellent question. I like that question very much, because now there must be the good governance means public sector, private sector, well as NGO and INGO should work together. Now we see it's happening, because basically not like sometimes back, this year, last evening I saw how NGO as well as the CBOC working together. So they are having a awareness program. That awareness program is actually very productive, because people know that NGOs and also the CBOC as well as other institutions, they have one plan. To achieve that plan, as Professor said, we have 2011-2016 National Human Rights Action Plan. What happened to that? Because one regime defeated and another regime comes, but don't change the policies. Certain good policies are there. If those policies actually happen, we could be a better state. But 100% if we are changing those things, but it never happened in USA. What Obama said, change, no change. Guantanamo Bay, torture house still there. So likewise, what I am insisting here, we must take the good practices. There can be some bad practices, you can withdraw that, but good practices you can take together, as well as your main question, NGOs and INGOs, they must take the leadership. As in Japan, politicians are not in the front. All these public servants and NGOs are working there. Politicians are in back seats. But here, that culture you can't change. To change that culture, civil society must come up with certain drafts, and they must lead the public. So it happened in January 8 and also last election. But I see now it's suddenly declining. Politicians once again dominating. Politicians once again gaining their power. So if these NGOs are weakened, that is the end. So therefore NGOs must stand together. All NGOs must get together and fight for this bribery and corruption. The preventive methods are very important.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mahana Mehra. I now move on to Mr. Srilal Laktilaka, who is also an attorney at law, works very closely with the President, if I may say that. Mr. Laktilaka, what is the way forward for a country like Sri Lanka? A lot of issues cropped up right now in terms of action that needs to be taken.
Now December 9th, we are celebrating the International Day of Anti-Corruption. So that's why at the beginning, at the outset, I said that we need a new approach towards anti-corruption. At least by 2030, we must achieve this goal. That is, the goal is to eradicate, not as Mr. Mahanam said, Dr. Mahanam said, managing, to eradicate corruption from our society, which is a disease, and it bleeds out our nation. For that, I think first, although the existing laws, the Penal Code, the Bribery and Corruption Commission Act is there, that is not enough to tackle the modern day corruption. So I think we need new legal regime to tackle this. Then we need certain capacity building work within the institutions or structures, as correctly said in this discussion, the investigation, the interrogation, and even filing cases or litigation has to be changed. So those are the most important things in order to achieve eradication of corruption. So finally we need attitude, certain attitude, societal attitude, because we know that not only politicians, these civil society organizations, INGOs, they are also corrupt in Sri Lanka. So we have to change all together if we want to see a corruption-free society.
Thank you very much, Mr. Laktilaka. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for joining us this evening. Mr. Birsekar, Professor Jayasinghe, Mr. Laktilaka, as well as Dr. Mahana Mehra. Thank you very much, Chaturanga, Sonali, as well as Nandi, for joining us this evening. We spoke of many states. We spoke of Denmark. We spoke of Norway. We spoke of Singapore. We spoke of South Africa. We spoke of many nations. I fervently hope one day someone, wherever they are, will speak of our little island, Sri Lanka, for championing change, for bringing forth good governance and a country which would stand tall for eradicating corruption as well. I leave you tonight with a quote. It is not power that corrupts, but fear. Fear of losing power corrupts those who wield it, and fear of the scourge of power corrupts those who are subject to it. Take care. and good night.